gentlemen, welcome to America's Auto Enthusiast Program. This is Auto World. And now, here's your host, Bob Long.
Hey, thank you very much for being here. I so appreciate you joining us each and every week at this very same time. If you're new to the program, welcome. We've been on the air since 1992 and have expanded over the years from a 1-hour show to 2 hours, and on many of these affiliate stations, 3 hours as well. And don't forget, if you're away from your favorite local station, our network has got vast internet capability, so you can listen to the show on demand. We basically stream the show 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As soon as this show is complete, it will replace last week's show, and you'll be able to hear that for the coming week. And you can also listen on your telephone to the show, and there's a podcast and archives and all kinds of goodies. And the best news of all is it's 100% free. Well, it's that time. It's time to pop the hood and go to one of our regular contributors here on the show. And he is the man that I turn to about all things synthetic oil and oil in general. He's a certified lubrication specialist with over 25 years of experience. He spent time in the Navy as a U.S. nuclear propulsion engineer, and he is one of the largest Amsoil dealers in all of North America. It's a pleasure to welcome Dan Watson back to the show. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine this evening, Bob. You sound good and strong tonight, so everything must be going well.
Well, thank you. Hopefully getting a little bit better every week as my health improves. I'm looking forward to getting myself back to where I once was, so it's just a matter of time.
Well, I don't want you out here on the side of the street when I'm driving, running by doing your 26-mile marathon practice, So.
That's right. Let's talk about, before we get to questions, and we got questions from all over the place, but something that seems to be making a lot of news. It's called low-speed pre-ignition, or Lspi. Tell us about it.
Well, this is a thing, and it may be completely new to some of our listeners, and others may have seen some articles on this, but there's a situation that has developed in these direct injected engines. Okay. Again, we all have to understand that when new technology comes out, no matter how much you plan or what you do, sometimes you just downright get surprised by things that pop up that were not anticipated. What low-speed pre-ignition is, it's a little event that can take place, but it can be very detrimental to your engine. And what it does is, most of the time, they think it comes, and I say they think because this is so new, they're trying to figure it out. A droplet of oil and fuel accumulate actually on the side of the piston in a position on the piston which is above the top ring on the piston. But it's actually on the side. It's on the crown on the side. Now, when that little bit of oil and a little fuel collects into a droplet and that piston is coming up, it tosses that droplet up into the combustion chamber. And unfortunately, before the ignition should take place, this droplet of oil and fuel together will detonate. In other words, it will not just burn like it's a gas, it makes it a detonation, like a minor explosion. And the problem is, some of these have been violent enough to damage the engine, to either deform the piston, break the connector rod, a number of things. So it's not something to be taken as, well, it's just one of those technical things that doesn't matter much. It can actually be a danger to the engine. So what has happened? The industry is attacking this from some different directions. They're doing it in the software of the computer. They're looking at hardware, meaning how the piston geometry and how it's put together. Also, they're determining that fuel needs to be extremely clean. We're not talking about the octane level. We're talking about particulate in the fuel that shouldn't be there. So fuel needs to be very clean. And the oil that contributes to this can either contribute to it or stop it. So if the oil is formulated correctly, it won't go boom. It won't do that. So you'd say, well, what do they change and what do they do? Well, there's a whole additive package that you have to start adjusting some things because certain parts of the additive package that's already in oil may contribute to it. So you have to start adjusting how much of part of the additive package you put in another place, and now you have to start figuring out how to compensate for that and how to change the balance of your additive package so that it still works as well as you want it to, but that it prevents this low-speed pre-ignition. So it's a pretty straightforward thing for the oil formulators, but to our listeners, what you need to be aware of are really a couple things. One is that the oil needs to be able to say on it that it prevents low-speed pre-ignition, LSPI. Should be somewhere on the bottle or something saying that it has been formulated to prevent LSPI. Doesn't say that. Right now I wouldn't use it. I'd wait until it says that on whatever the brand of oil is. Now, the API, American Petroleum Institute, they have a spec that is now coming into effect, which currently we have SN is the specification. But SN Plus will be an intermediate specification before the next SP, the next one down the road. And so SN Plus, they have added a required test for LSPI. And oils will have to pass that test for LSPI in order to be rated SN Plus. So good news from my standpoint, all Amsoil oils currently marketed are, well, in this test, actually, you do 5 events and you're allowed to have 1 or 2 failures in the 5 events. Well, Amsoil does 5 events with no failures, so it's 100% LSPI certified and SN Plus rated. So that's good for me as an Amsoil distributor to be able to tell you that. But for other oils, you're just looking, if it gets the new SN Plus on the bottle, then that means it covers LSPI. Or you look for something on the bottle which says LSPI certified, something along those lines, to tell you that it won't do it. Now, you don't have to worry about this unless you have a direct injected engine. Let's be clear here. If you're out there with 95% of the cars and trucks in the marketplace, you don't have a direct injected gasoline engine. But if you do have one, this is an important thing for you to be aware of, because you could have some pretty catastrophic damage to your engine if this happens in the worst way. You might get by with a light version of it, and it's just like a big bang, almost like a backfire inside the engine, and it rattles some and then it goes on. But if it hits it just right and just wrong, it could break something and you could have major damage to your engine. So it's important to understand, again, for our listeners, it's LSPI, low-speed pre-ignition. It only applies to direct injected gasoline engines.
Great information, and you'll find those direct injected engines primarily in new cars. So if you have an older car, you don't have to worry about it. We'll take a time out. When we come back on the other side, we've got a question from Alabama and more straight ahead with Dan Watson from the Lube page.
Broadcasting from the middle of Corvette Boulevard and Stingray Avenue, this is Auto World with your host, Bob Long.
Dan Watson is with us this hour, taking your questions and calls, 855-660-4261. or Bob at AutoWorldRadio.com, Bob at BobLongRadio.com. That's the backup one. And, of course, you can always reach out to Dan at Dan Watson at thelubepage.com. The first question of the day here is from Huntsville, Alabama. And the person writes, Dan, can I run diesel oil in my gasoline pickup? I have a gas truck and 2 diesel trucks, and I'm looking for one oil for all vehicles. Interesting question.
Well, it's a question we get a lot from business people that have a small fleet, sometimes even a large fleet, where they have, a few trucks and they want to buy oil, but they don't want to get into the situation where it's possible that they make a mistake on which oil that they put into which vehicle. Now, the answer to this is pretty straightforward. Yes, you could run that gasoline, you could run the diesel oil in that gasoline pickup with a couple of caveats, okay, and I'll get into that. But you should not run the gasoline engine oil in your pickup trucks, okay? Now, here's the main reason we're getting into. For a gasoline engine, you have some different things that you're concerned with because you have an engine that's running 8.5, 9 compression, somewhere around there typically. And so it's got its own issues and how it functions and byproducts of combustion that it makes that have to be dealt with by gasoline engine oil. A diesel, on the other hand, runs anywhere from 18 to, let's say, 22 to 1 compression. And by the fact that it does that, it reaches much higher temperatures in its cylinders, and it can create some of the same, but also in greater magnitude, different types of byproducts of combustion. So you have to have the right additive package to deal with that. So that more robust additive package in the diesel oil might not be used in the gasoline engine because it doesn't create all those things. But the gasoline engine oil doesn't have enough additives in it to handle all the stuff that's created by the diesel engine. So you can go with a diesel oil for the gasoline application. However, you still need to look on that diesel oil and make sure it's got the ratings on it. It'll have the API classification, and it'll say that it might be, and if it says that it is an SN/CK4 rated oil, then that means it meets the latest diesel and it meets the latest gasoline engine oil. And of course, you could run that in either gasoline or diesel engine. Now, when you go over and look at one that says that it is API SN rated, meaning for gasoline engine, but it doesn't even carry a diesel rating, that tells you something. Hey, I can use this in gas, but can't use it in diesel. But the other one gave me both the gasoline and the diesel ratings on the bottle of oil. So that's telling me that it would work in either application. So primarily that's the thing that we tell the guys. Amsoil actually makes some oils that carry both of those for the fleet guys so that they can typically get it. They make a 5W30 that is both CK4 and SN rated, which is an excellent fleet level oil, especially for the more modern diesels that are calling for 530 or 1030 rather than 1540. So hopefully that's enough of an answer there from Huntsville, Alabama. And it's one we get quite often, so hopefully it's a useful answer for some other people.
Yep, some great information there. Mary in Georgia, Bainbridge, Georgia, to be specific, she wants to know, are Amsoil oils recommended for 20,000 miles, like Mobil annual protection oil?
Well, in short, it's a good question because Mobil's making a big pitch on a pretty good oil they're making for 1 year or 20,000 miles. So we like to say at Amsoil that they're just verifying what we've been saying now since 1971, okay, is that you betcha you could run oil for 20,000, 25,000 miles if you formulate it correctly. Mobil is testifying to that with this new oil, and it's nothing wrong with Mobil annual protection oil. Just as I say to people, you will recognize now that oil is going to cost you as much or more than Amsoil does. So there has always been a reason that our 25,000-mile oil costs more, is because it costs a whole lot more to make it. So Mobil's just verifying that with their annual change oil, that they say 20,000, we offer up to 25,000. So yes to Mary. Amsoil does have oils that can be 20,000, 25,000-mile recommendations, or 1 year, whichever comes first. Big difference between Amsoil and Mobil. Mobil tells you that if you're still under your new vehicle warranty, to stick with their warranty recommendations, even though Mobil stands behind you could go 20,000 with their oil. Amsoil says is that if you're under warranty, you can still run our oil for 25,000 miles, because we're going to back it up with the Amsoil warranty of security and tell you that you don't have to worry about it, because if they say that your car, something happened to your car that was due to Amsoil and you're inside our parameters, then Amsoil is simply going to stand up for their warranty and take care of it. So that's the biggest difference, is that you can run us for 25,000 miles even if the car's under warranty. So that answers Mary's question.
Very good. Let's go to WMKT, Traverse City, Michigan. David with a question. He says, I've been to Traverse City, just as a sidebar, that's the home of the Hagerty Classic Car Insurance Company, and this time of the year it's beautiful there. There's a lot of boating. Matter of fact, that insurance company started out as a wooden boat insurer, and then morphed into doing automobiles. Now they're the largest in the whole world. But David wrote us here, it's hot now, but the winter here is brutal, and that it is. It's very close to Canada, and there's a lot of lakes around. So are synthetics really better in cold weather? Would a 5W30 Petroleum do okay, since it has the 5W rating? So he's a little bit worried about the 5W. What do you think, Dan?
Well, it wouldn't carry a 5W rating if it wouldn't pass the 5W rating for the petroleum oil. And how they do that is, the problem in petroleum is it still has quite a bit of wax in the oil, and when you get to cold temperatures, that wax is going to solidify, and that causes you to have problems, flow problems, when the wax starts starting to solidify. So they put what they call pour-point depressants chemicals into the oil to prevent wax crystallization in the oil. Okay, now, and that works, and it does work. And so, yeah, you could get by with a 5W petroleum in the cold weather. The problem is that the additives to do that, they won't last as long as you think. We'll talk about it a little more when we come back.
That sounds good. And again, if you got a question, email us up, bob@autoworldradio.com. 10 miles east of the highway.
And now, back to the show with the highest octanes, Auto World, and your host, Bob Long.
If you have questions about lubrication, our lubrication specialist is on board with us. It's Dan Watson, and we're addressing a question from a gentleman in Traverse City, Michigan, all about the difference in temperature at that particular locale. And just to read the question one more time, it's beautiful right there in Traverse City right now as we speak, but winter right there is brutal, and it definitely is. Are synthetics better in cold weather? Wouldn't a 5W30 Petroleum do okay, since it has the 5W rating? So again, people compare, kind of comparing apples to oranges. There's a big difference between regular petroleum oil and Amsoil synthetic oil.
Well, the thing about a good synthetic engine oil is it has no wax. There's no wax in the oil. It's pure, so you're not going to have crystallization of wax causing the oil to become thick, solid in some cases if it gets cold enough. Now, the way that you achieve a 5W rating with petroleum is by adding a significant amount of what's called pour-point depressants. And what they are is they are chemicals designed to prevent the wax, which is inherent in petroleum oil, from crystallizing. Now, so you're going to get away with that 5W petroleum. It is going to start to pump. The problem is that even in the band that's required to be called a 5W, it's going to be barely trying to stick in there, whereas a high-quality synthetic will have much less resistance to flow. It will be ready to rock because it has no impurities, no wax in it whatsoever. So you're going to find that synthetics will naturally work in extreme cold weather where petroleum oil has to be highly additized with chemicals to try to withstand this condition. The problem is, in real cold weather, is that those additives have a life that they last, and they start being used up gradually over time. So what happens is that your oil may start out pretty well at the beginning of winter, but if winter's 4 or 5 months long, you may be getting some fairly thick oil and having some starting problems in real cold weather. And what I mean starting problems, folks, is just getting the thing to turn over, okay? When the oil gets thick and doesn't flow very well, it's really a restriction on getting that engine to turn over and start up. If you have a diesel engine, you need to really know that they got to turn about 100 RPM to start up. So if you can't get it turning over fast enough, it just won't start up. So cold weather and synthetics are natural buddies. They go together. Synthetic oil performs very well in extreme cold and very well in extreme hot. So anytime we're talking about getting into those kind of conditions, you do yourself a favor by having a good quality synthetic engine oil, because the petroleum oils do the best they can, but they just can't keep up in those conditions with the performance of the high-quality synthetic.
That makes so much sense. Dan, why don't we reiterate your telephone number, because unlike most specialists, experts, you pick up the phone and answer people's calls or return their calls all the time. You bet.
And folks can get me throughout the United States at 800-370-2986. You can even call me from Canada on that number, and call me from Alaska and Hawaii on 800-370-2986.
We have a couple of great stations in Montana, and Vladimir writes us from that neck of the woods. And he writes, I do a lot of snowmobiling in the winter. By October, I will be somewhere on snow. I've heard that Amsoil has some great oil for these machines. What would you recommend?
Well, now, in the snowmobile world, just like in the Sea-Doo water scooters, we can have either a 4-stroke or a 2-stroke snowmobile. So it depends upon what you're riding, but good for us is that Amsoil makes one for either kind. And when we're looking at the 2-stroke oils, they did a test a number of years ago on a large rental fleet of snowmobiles that go into Yellowstone on, they have the park really closes in the winter, but they have some controlled trails that they allow people to stay on with the proper guides and so forth. So they have these big fleets of rental snowmobiles. And, of course, this is, again, very brutally cold weather in Yellowstone in January. You can imagine. My brother-in-law lives up in Idaho, in Rigby, Idaho, and it can get downright cold in that portion of the country. So how do you keep these things going, and what do you do to make them run the best? Well, a number of these snowmobiles, these 2-strokes, have what they call power control valves in the exhaust. And these power control valves are really designed to restrict the exhaust under a lot of circumstances to prevent that engine from trying to have what they call just uncontrolled runaway, because the way a 2-stroke engine is, if it can get enough fuel and stuff, and it just keeps sucking air and going faster and faster and faster, and sometimes you could get a runaway. Well, the power control valves say, whoop, nope, can't, because I'm not going to let the exhaust get out here any faster than I want to, and that will control how fast this engine runs. So anyway, those power control valves are known to be sticking problems. They start sticking because they got to move and back and forth. And so when the exhaust is coming across them, depending on what's in the exhaust, you can end up with these things sticking. So here's the deal. The two-stroke interceptor oil that Amsoil makes is designed and was tested in this fleet for a year over one winter to keep adjusting it until they got the perfect additive package in it so that it would, in fact, solve this problem and run these things with limited or no maintenance required of the constant. Otherwise, about every 25 hours, you're having to take these things apart and clean these power control valves. So great formulation in the interceptor oil. Now, if you have a four-stroke, Amsoil makes a 0W40 high-performance four-stroke engine oil for those applications. And so what they've tried to do is tailor two oils really straight into this market and into this condition. Remember, the Amsoil guys live basically in Duluth, Minnesota, in the region. So snowmobiling and winter sports are in their blood. They can't help it. So when we start talking about designing something to work in snowmobiles, boy, this is just like, something that they feel they're divinely inspired to work on because it's their joy in the world to get on those trails in Minnesota and run these beautiful snowmobiles all up into, they have trails there, Bob, that go out of Duluth all the way up to International Falls, and in the winter they actually have these trails and they have restaurants and stop places on them and all this kind of stuff for all the people on these trails.
Oh, that's great.
I'd call that dedicated. Dedicated when you're out there and it's minus, 10 or 15 degrees and you got the snowmobile and you got the Arctic suit on and, hey, let's stop at the next place and, imbibe. And sometimes I would think either something hot or maybe something, with antifreeze in it or something to keep you going because it can be cold. But again, these oils are made and tailor-made for these applications. It's not like you're using something that was designed for an overall type situation. These things were tailor-made and worked out and tested for a very specific application, and that's these snowmobiles, either two-stroke or four-stroke. So you can't beat those oils for those machines.
That sounds like a real winner. We're going to have more with Dan Watson, the CEO of the Lube Page. That's the website, thelubepage.com. Dan's email, danwatson@thelubepage.com. I'm Bob Long. You're listening to Auto World. Don't go away. We're coming back with lots more.
Hey, it's Billy F. Gibbons from ZZ Top, and you're listening right here to Auto World.
Being here, we so much appreciate it. Dan Watson is with us, CEO of thelubepage.com, and he's the man when it comes to knowing everything there is to know about oil, and certified lubrication specialist for more than 25 years, a former nuclear propulsion submarine technician in the U.S. Navy, and has one of the largest Amsoil distributorships, one of the largest in the entire North American continent. So this gentleman knows what he's talking about, and people are hitting us with all kinds of questions here, including Bernard, who's in Warren, Pennsylvania. And Dan, he's going to take you back to your youth, because I know you own this particular vehicle. I forget exactly what year, but Bernard has got a 1968 Chevrolet Camaro with all the bells and whistles. However, he has the 350 cubic inch high performance engine. I know you got a 327. I'm concerned that the modern APSN oil will not provide the protection I need. What do you recommend?
Well, I wish I had that 68 Camaro. You always think about cars you had in the past. It's like you'd sure love to have. And then when I was in high school, the football coach had a 65 Mustang. It was just beautiful Mustang.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, those cars back then, and now you can find them, but they cost a whole lot more now than they cost in 1968.
Yeah, a whole lot more.
Yeah. So anyway, this is a good question, and I'm sure we have lots of people out there that listen to your show because these people love cars, and they can't find a better place to find interesting information about cars than on Auto World Radio. So you got to have a lot of guys out there and gals that have some of these classic vehicles from the 60s and 70s. And, Bob, you know, we go over this at different times, but you don't know who's listening, so it's better to go over it again because new people are listening all the time. And if someone out there has heard it before, then you just get reinforced on it. But these cars were built a lot of times in this era with what they call flat tappet valve system, cam system. And what that means is that they had, in a lot of cases, they had solid or hydraulic lifters, but these cars didn't yet come with roller cams, okay, or roller lifters. So when you get a contact on the lobe of the cam with that lifter that is just a nice, smooth piece of round metal, okay, rolling over that cam, sounds pretty innocuous, like it's not going to do anything. But what you have is what's called contact and slide motion. Now, to protect yourself in contact and slide, you need anti-wear additives for this particular application. So you've got to have zinc and phosphorus to provide that protection. That's what they did when they made them. The oils were designed, and by the way, the oils, in a lot of these vehicles, they used 40-weight oils, just starting to look at some 30-weight oils, but a lot of 40-weight oils, so they had a little bit thicker oil film, and they loaded it up pretty well with zinc and phosphorus to give you protection so that you wouldn't begin to wear the camshaft. People go, wow, wear the camshaft. Well, imagine that this is like you get a buffing compound, something that you buy and you're going to buff out some paint. So you got some really fine buffing compound, which is, you know, gosh, probably in sandpaper it might be 1,000 grit, you know, it's tiny. But on that camshaft, imagine over a period of time the millions of revolutions that it puts against, that it rubs over it. So if you had any lack of lubrication to protect that, it's going to polish it, but over time it's going to wear it and wear it down, and the lobe gets smaller and smaller, and the valve lifts less and less, and pretty soon you're not getting enough valve action to run the car, so it won't run. So we need to have an oil, a modern oil that will protect you. But the EPA and all the brain power there has decided that we have to limit zinc and phosphorus in our current engine oils. Our M and SN rated engine oils are limited by regulation to have no more than 800 parts per million of zinc and phosphorus. Okay, all right. Well, that's 800. Seems pretty good. But most of the oils prior to that, a lot for these cars were running 1,200 or 1,300 parts per million. So you're down about 30%, 35% in your zinc and phosphorus, which is the anti-wear additive to do this protection. So long term, you might have some additional wear that you didn't want to have using a current API SN rated engine oil. Okay, so Amsoil has a line of oils. They just refer to them as Z-Rod oils. And they just call it Z-Rod because they're talking about like the hot rods and the muscle cars and stuff from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, any of these cars that were muscle cars and stuff. And this oil is highly additized with zinc and phosphorus to provide maximum protection for these particular types of flat tappet cam system. So if you didn't know this and you have one of these older cars, it was only when we went past SL, the last rating, SL oils did not require a reduction in zinc and phosphorus. But the next rating, SM, and now we're at SN and soon to be at SP, they've all required this reduction in zinc and phosphorus. So you're best off finding yourself a good quality engine oil that has adequate levels of zinc and phosphorus. You can get it from Amsoil. It's called Z-Rod oil. So we'll finish that one so we have a chance to get to the last question, Bob.
Yeah, let's do so. This
and
one
let me know what time are we
Cedar.
getting out of here so I don't carry over into when you're leaving.
All right, so shoot for about 57:30 or so.
Okay.
From Cedar City, Utah, my boys like to ride dirt bikes. These little bikes really take a beating. What does Amsoil offer to help keep these things going? I don't think I can get the boys off on how hard they ride. So, interesting question. We've never talked about dirt bikes, but tell us what is available.
Well, they're big time fun for. They had a time, I think they had this Dolly Parton type competitive thing going on across the country where sponsoring all these little dirt bike meets where these younger guys, teenagers would come in and ride these dirt bikes in these little competition trails and so forth. But dirt bikes are, it's just a small bike. Now, today they come either 4-stroke or 2-stroke. For a long time, you could just get 2-stroke. So quickly, so we don't run out of time, for the 2-stroke version, it's just like those snowmobiles. This Interceptor 2-stroke is dynamite for these. You could, if you were really riding the racing circuit, use the Dominator Racing 2-stroke. Either one of those, but that Interceptor will be plenty for the typical hard driving, hard effort. They rev those things unbelievably, the RPM they run those dirt bikes. Now, if you have a 4-stroke one, okay, Amsoil really went after to satisfy you because they make a 10W40, a 10W50, and a 10W60 oil for dirt bikes. The reason? The different manufacturers that are in that business, they call for 1040. Some call for 1050 and some call for 1060. So Amsoil decided, hey, that's what they call for. Let's meet what they want. And they make a really top-shelf synthetic engine oil to protect those small, very small 4-stroke engines, okay? They also have dirt bike transmission fluid, believe it or not, because these guys have transmissions. They have to shift it with their foot, but they have a transmission, and it needs to have the highest level lubricant in there because you're just pushing these things to the limit. Nobody probably pushes anything harder than these people push these dirt bikes. These little engines are not very big, and they are just winding them out all the time and just giving it everything that little thing can do. So you got to use the best oils. 2-stroke, Interceptor, or Dominator, and for 4-stroke, one of those dirt bike special oils in either 1040, 1050, or 1060. So I think we got you covered.
Perfect. One more time, give out your email address and telephone number.
Email Dan Watson at thelubepage.com. Telephone number 800-370-2986.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan.
See you next time, Bob.
Yep, that's going to do it for this hour of Auto World. If you're leaving us, we'll see you next time around.
I always end up